One dusky evening, the sky was painted with the colors of farewell. Ashraf sat by the window, the golden light painting his wrinkled face with its last rays. It was the kind of day that makes one introspective, a day that whispers time is running out. And it was on this day that Ashraf had an epiphany. Or maybe it was a premonition. A sudden wave of realization washed over him. He knew his time was near. With a great effort, he pulled himself up from the chair. His joints protested, every muscle aching with a familiar weariness. But he had to do this. He had to write. Reaching for a notebook that laid on a shelf, he pulled it close. His hands shook, but his heart was firm. What would he leave behind? Not for his sons, not for the world, but for Tommy, the stray dog, who was his only companion. Not a legacy, not a history, just a story of love. He wanted to leave that behind. It wasn't easy. The pen trembled in his hand, mirroring the tremor in his heart. But slowly, as if guided by an invisible hand, the words began to flow. "Dear Tommy," he wrote, knowing that his dog would never read these words, but needing to write them anyway. Letters aren't always written to be read. Sometimes they're written to be felt. In the language of the hearts, Ashraf poured out his soul. He wrote of their first meeting, a small, shivering ball of fur outside his shop all those years ago. He wrote of the unspoken bond they forged, of the shared silences that spoke volumes, of the nights that were unlonely because of the furry body curled up at the foot of his bed. He wrote about how the world had moved on, how the people he once called family had put him in a home for the elders, how his own children forgot the warmth of his hand, the sound of his voice, the feel of his touch. But Tommy never did. He wrote about the guilt he sometimes felt, the times he didn't have enough food to share, the days he couldn't pet him properly, the scolding he had received for bringing a dog into his house. And then he wrote about the joy, the simple pleasures like the way Tommy's tail thumped against the floor, the silent understanding between them, the wet nose nudging his hand, the soft panting beside him as he slept. And finally, he wrote a promise. He told Tommy where he would leave his favorite sweater, the old gray one, so he could still smell him when he was gone. He didn't know how much longer he had, but he wanted Tommy to know that he loved him, that he was loved. That night, Tommy didn't sleep. He rested his head gently on Ashraf's lap, his eyes never leaving the old man's face. The rhythmic rise and fall of Ashraf's chest, the sound of his soft snores, were the only music Tommy knew. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, it was warm. And as dawn broke, Ashraf's breathing stopped. Tommy didn't howl. He didn't bark. He simply lay there, his eyes fixed on the lifeless face, his body unmoving, understanding in a way only love understands. When the neighbors came, they found the dog beside the lifeless body, his eyes tired, yet still full of loyalty, his gaze unwavering. Ashraf's sons arrived 2 days later. They were dressed in black, their faces somber, carrying with them the scent of the city, of new lives. They took what was valuable to them, the old land papers, some yellowed photographs, a few antiques. They didn't ask about Tommy. To them, he was just a dog, an inconvenience that needed to be cleared out. But to Ashraf, he was everything. Left behind in the empty house, Tommy wandered from room to room, sniffing the sweater, lying beside the bed, listening to the silence that now felt truly empty. He refused to eat, his gaze fixed on the door that had been left ajar, as if waiting for his master to return. For a dog who had known only solitude, Ashraf's love was a revolution. And in his final moments, he had made sure that Tommy knew, no, he was not alone. He was loved.